Hello and welcome to the Being Well podcast series. In these episodes, our guests discuss their experiences with mental health. These are personal experiences and thoughts that have been shared. This is not official guidance on how to seek mental health support. This is just what worked for us.
I think that means we're live. Great. So, welcome back. It's been a while since we've done one of these. Actually, life has a tendency sometimes to get in the way a bit, but welcome back. Today we have Ollie, who is a trustee here at the charity. For anyone who has forgotten, he was on the first one we did. So thanks for coming back, mate. Appreciate that. And with us today, we have a guest. We have Ollie's sister, Paige. Welcome to the fun zone. How does it feel?
It feels quite amazing. Quite an emotional moment for me.
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
Come true.
absolutely. Ever since I kind of heard about this, I've been bombarding Ollie trying to get me on here, but now it's finally happened. So yeah, I'm Paige. I'm currently in San Francisco on a year abroad. I am trans, and I kind of a bit of a history about that is I started sort of counselling when I was probably about 14 or 15ish. I knew a bit before that. The first time I kind of told anyone that I thought that I was when I initially found out what being trans was and that it was a thing. Which was I think I was 11. And then, kind of counselling up until about, I think I was 18 or so, and then onto medication and hormones and whatnot, and waiting lists, and it's kind of been like that ever since, really.
Nice. Thank you for that little intro. That's super helpful just to sort of like set what we're doing here. I mean, so this is going to follow largely the same process as the previous episodes we've done, but this is like the first of a series of looking at mental health, but with specific lens focuses. And obviously today, that lens focus is going to be through the guise of transgenderism. So I think just to like kick it off, I think it'd be fair to say that transgenderism on its own has gone through like quite a transformative journey in the last, I don't know what kind of date spread you'd give it, but from at least from my perspective, like the last like 15 years, like from when myself and Ollie were, at the age where you started having your, going through the journey yourself, like 11 years old, it just wasn't really anything that was spoken widely about. It wasn't even like they mentioned it at school. It was very much just not really addressed. And now you get to where we are today, where it's, so heavily in the forefront of social discourse. And it's like a completely different picture now. And it's interesting that, your journey with it has almost coincided with its own journey as like a thing and as a movement. And I think what would be quite a good starting point is, do you see that within yourself, like as transgenderism has progressed from where it was to where it is? Are there things that stand out to you from, at early stages in your journey, mid stages or late stages of things that were happening as part of the bigger picture that you were involved in that you think profoundly had a positive impact on, your personal and mental well-being going through that process?
Yeah. So, like I said, I think the first time I kind of had any sort of realization, whether that just be growing up and maturity or the fact it just wasn't spoken about, was when I was 11, and that's kind of when it all clicked. And like you say, we went to the same school, and it wasn't really spoken about too much. Be that just because of the time, or the fact it was a Catholic school, maybe. But yeah, no, it's I think it definitely it's tricky to sort of I don't know. It's tricky to say because obviously I was sort of growing up and growing more mature, and you're exposed to more things. Thanks to things again like social media, which again has kind of coincided with all of us. So you're kind of exposed to more things anyway. So it's tricky to say whether I was sort of just growing up, growing more mature, being exposed to more things, and therefore learning more about it, or whether society as a whole was going through that process as well, like you said. I think I'm sure it's a mixture of both, as it always is. But yeah, I think. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, did you know what it was when you were 11? Like, did you understand what you were feeling?
Prior to, I didn't understand it at all. But I think when I started to research it more around again that sort of age, start of secondary school, I definitely understood it to the extent that an 11-year-old can understand it, I think. Obviously, there's only so much you can sort of comprehend at that age, and it seemed to make sense at the time, and still does make sense. So I think, yeah, I think I did. I think the overall discourse becoming more broad and becoming more open has, in general, had more of a positive impact, especially when I was sort of mid-teens, like 15, 16, because people started sort of talking about it in a way that was, I wouldn't say progressive, but exploratory, and just trying to educate yourself and just, see kind of what it's all about. I think in recent years, as it's become more of an open discussion, I don't know, there's more weight put on it than is needed, and it seems to be a point of manipulation among everyone, really. So, and again, I don't know if that's because I'm growing up and can understand things more and I'm exposed to more. But I think it just becoming more of an open discourse can't hurt, right? It's when it becomes not a discourse but a lecture from either side. That's when it's I don't know. That's when I think you run into difficulties, like it seems that everyone is at the minute. But yeah.
It's interesting that you say when it goes from, discourse to a lecture, because I still think there's such a degree of like lack of education from the point of view from, the wrong side of the argument, if you will. Like, I do think there is so much more that people need to understand. And I guess it is about finding that balance, right, of it being less of like it's like there's a difference between educational and informative, and then not preachy, that's the wrong word entirely, but you see what I'm trying to say? Like, that lecture feel that people don't like because they feel like they're being taught to like a child kind of thing. But ultimately, it's not about that. There's gaps in people's understanding, and there's gaps in what you're perceiving to be true actually isn't the case. And I think that is a really hard sort of balance to actually strike. But I do think, talking about it more and more as we are, those are the stepping stones to getting to a point where there is just mutual respect and understanding among it. But I completely appreciate like it's there's ways to go yet, but yeah, it's a tough one. A real tough one to sort of hit that sweet spot where people are receptive that previously weren't, just the things that are new to them.
Yeah, I think the more discussion, regardless of, arguably at this stage, regardless of the context of the discussion, I think is positive. It's kind of all publicity is good publicity at the minute, because it is such an early stage of its sort of public discourse, which it is. But like you said, I think there is this balance that needs to be found between due to the lack of knowledge and the lack of understanding, and ultimately lack of respect. Which, the lack of understanding, you'd think, well, let's just lecture people, let's just teach people, let's sort of just talk at them and tell them what needs to be said. But then, again, that's where the kind of respect comes in, and then you want to move towards an open discourse. But then if you're moving towards an open discourse, then people are, I don't know, less likely to listen, because it is an educational thing, especially again at the moment. So there is this balance that needs to be struck. I'm not I have no solutions to that, but yeah, I agree completely. There does need to definitely be a balance between the two that needs to be struck. I think it all just comes back to education, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And because there are those gaps, and I think we're getting to a point now where these conversations, I mean, education is best consumed at a young age, right? It's the same with what we do here at the charity is engaging young people in discussions on mental health. I think the same needs to be done for these wider social issues as well, because if it's if you learn about it from a young age, you carry that through as you grow up and you get more mature and you understand things better, and you just become naturally far more compassionate with that understanding being rooted in at an early age. And I think that's ultimately, not that I can really speak with much authority on the subject, but I think ultimately that's a goal for sure, having those discussions early on, because not even just for helping people who have already gone through their own transition, it's if you have those conversations with young children as they grow up, if they're aware of it, it might help them in their own, like it all comes back in full cycle. And I think it's starting at a point where you are receptive to because when you're younger in your life, you don't really have any prejudice. Like you can pretty much absorb anything that you get given as a kid, or like a young teenager, because ultimately you've not had the life experience to really have any reason to be against anything. And I think that's ultimately where those conversations start at that earlier age, because then you can just develop on that. And then I feel like no one loses, really. Like no one loses. It's it's just for greater common good in the wider social context, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, unfortunately, that's sort of the issue that it's running into at the minute, is this idea of this idea of indoctrination. Don't get me wrong, if somehow you're in a situation where your young child is being forced into something that they shouldn't be, then absolutely that's incorrect. And I think unfortunately that happens. Well, if it happens once, it's too many times, isn't it? So, and it is known to happen. But I think just having this, again, just this education. You're not telling anyone that that's how they should be or whatever. Just, I think, especially with kids, if you just let them know that this is a thing, that there are people like that.
It's like education around respect, right?
Exactly. And I think, for me, as soon as I was very confused for the first 11 years of my life, and then I found out what it was, and it kind of clicked. And while that doesn't obviously make things like dysphoria any easier, at least you understand what it actually is, and you can manage it, and so on. And if you have no idea what it is, and you're confused the whole time, and ultimately a lot of children will be, if this education isn't put out there, then I don't know, you're not going to have many children to sort of talk about it, because the issues are that severe. Do you know what I mean? So Yeah, I think it is just a matter of it's education, and not education for indoctrination, it's education for respect. Even if you just know about it so that you can be respectful to the
And help others, I guess, who might be going through something
yeah,
similar, right? And
yeah,
help yourself
exactly.
as well.
Exactly. That's yeah. No, absolutely. Like that's what I was. Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, fine.
Ultimately, I would wager. I mean, I can't speak for everyone who is trans or queer or anything, but ultimately, we just want to sort of be respected to the same level that everyone else is respected. Um, I wouldn't ever try and force any sort of ideology on anyone, be it to do with the LGBT community, be it political, be it religious, be it whatever. No one should do that, but it's just a matter of respect. It's as simple as that, really.
Because the bottom line is, I mean, you strip it down to its very core. It's just that you people. That's all it is. It's people interacting with people and having that education for respect, as you say. That's really well put. That's as much as it needs to be. Like the context within which you learn about that respect, that's cool. That can be through so many different facets, as you say, not just through LGBT. Like there are, mutual respect doesn't really have any boundaries. There are no parameters you can set for that. It covers all social issues. At the end of the day, it's people and people. That's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I do think, it's a grassroots movement that, like, children, as I say, they don't have prejudice. So making kids, or however, I'm not about to try and put like an age cap on it, but having those conversations at a relatively early on stage, just making them aware of the different types of people they are going to encounter in their life, because you can almost guarantee you'll come across every single walk of life in your time on this planet. It's it's how you interact with them that matters. And I think, like we said, it's that respect part that is arguably the most important bit, because that's just conducive to healthy human relationships. Like it's respect is like the foundation of like civilized society, is mutual respect between all people, right? So and we'll get there eventually, I'm sure.
I guess, like, on that note as well, I'm probably stepping in here and stepping on toes, but like, did you find that your mental health at any time in secondary school, when you were going through this journey, when your mental health was particularly low, did you find that was because of people being disrespectful? Or was it more internal, that you didn't know what was going on as you were going through school? Do you know what I mean? Like, where was what made you feel bad? What made you feel down?
I mean, a lot of it is just internal. Dysphoria, which is just the idea that you're in the wrong body and things don't match up. That's obviously the main source. That's kind of what it's all about. But I was extremely lucky to not really experience any sort of I don't know, not bullying or that sort of discrimination. I was very lucky not to experience that at school. I think I was probably just dealt a very good hand with the year group that I had.
Do you think that's maybe because you weren't very vocal about it at times?
I think a lot of it is that I think I was well respected in my year, for one reason or another. And I think then when I came out and I told everyone that respect was already there, and it didn't really change anything, which again, I'm very lucky that that was the case. I think, to be honest, a big thing, the main source of not like internal negativity was social media. Not from other people saying things about you or anything like that, but kind of just what you see. Like, it doesn't matter if you're trans, if you're anything. You see people on social media who look a certain way, and that's a completely unattainable goal for 99.9% of everyone on the planet, and it makes you feel rubbish about yourself because it's unattainable, and it's
I guess you saw it even more where, you know, you would see just a woman, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who looks a particular way. It's just someone who is born a woman, and you're like, oh shit, right? That's something that's unattainable, you know?
Exactly. And I think you see that on social media, and then again in person, like you said, anyone in school, anyone I saw out and about, anything, you look at that and there's just this feeling of jealousy, and you just get this, I don't know, like rock in your stomach, and it's like, I don't even know if that's a saying, much made that up, but you just get this feeling, and it's patent pending, and you just get this feeling, and it's just it's just rubbish. And I think the one thing that I found really hard was you're kind of drawn towards these trans influencers, these trans people on social media, because there's someone who can relate to sort of what you're going through on a fundamental level. And the issue with that, I would say, is while it's good to see that these people are there and they're speaking for your issues and for you and educating and so on, they generally, I don't know, they generally know that they are good looking. They generally know that they have got everything they want. They generally, are very happy in themselves after, getting what needs to be done, sort of thing, if that makes sense. And you're looking at these people who have gone through what you're probably going to go through. And again, you're looking at that, and that's a sort of unattainable thing. So it's kind of a mishmash of seeing people in person, which is unattainable, seeing just normal people on social media, which is unattainable, seeing trans people on social media, which then it is unattainable. And it is just mainly this feeling of jealousy, I think. For me, it was anyway.
It's interesting you say that, because I was going to ask something along the lines of, social media became more prevalent as throughout your time at school, right? And as you were starting to go on this journey yourself. And I think I was kind of going to lean into the question of, do you think that was a good thing, being able to have more exposure to people on social media who were going through the same thing, or did that make it even worse, right? And it sounds like, contrary to what I thought you would have found it more reassuring almost to suddenly get this wide exposure to people who are going through the same thing. But it actually sounds like even then it was still a negative, right? It still had like quite severe repercussions.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky balance to sort of, it's a tricky sort of balance to have, where it's definitely reassuring to start with. And I think initially I found it helpful. But after a certain period of time, you're constantly bombarded with it, and it ends up just, I don't know, it ends up just being another source of, again, for me, it was just another source of dysphoria, of negativity. I think I remember distinctly, I went through everyone I was following, and I got rid of like all the on like Instagram, all the trans influencers and celebrities and so on, who I knew I was following because I thought I should, not because I really wanted to. There's this, I think there's this stigma within transitioning where you have to be a certain way, and I think trans influencers give that off, where you have to be extremely masculine or extremely feminine, and you have to fit a mold. And I think that kind of just exacerbated the problem, was following these people and knowing that not just that I didn't fit this mold, but I didn't really want to. Because at the end of the day, you're your own person anyway. And I remember after getting rid of all of those people off my social medias, I felt a lot better. I feel like a weight had been lifted, which shouldn't have been the case. Like, shouldn't have gotten to that stage anyway. So yeah, I think it's reassuring to know that those people are out there. But after a period where you are just bombarded with it, it's, for me at least, it just became another source of, like I said, negativity and self-loathing.
It's really interesting, like your experience with that. It's almost like having such vastly different ends of the spectrum, either looking super masculine or super feminine. It's almost like you, whether that's an internal thing for you, it's like almost being put back in a box that you don't want to be in, kind of thing. And it exacerbates an already pre-existing, cause of, a detriment to your mental well-being. And I don't know if interesting is the right word, but it is from an outside perspective, seeing that can still happen even within the bounds of this particular journey that you're going through is that's probably something, like, I'm completely on the same page with Ollie there. Like, I would have assumed that, having that content, ready at your fingertips would have been like a source of comfort and solace, knowing that, there are so many other people like me that are going through the same thing. But it actually got to a point of, when you diminishing returns kind of thing. And that is absolutely, I mean, like I said, I would have assumed it would have been the opposite. So it's really interesting to see that it can still be a source of grief, even from within.
Yeah, I think it is just a case of, it kind of puts this target and this goal out there of, this is what you should be aiming for. And like I said, people, even, cis women, all cis women are different, all cis men are different, and whatever. And again, having this one target, which a lot of these trans influencers, they are very similar in that way, or at least the ones that I've experienced. I'm sure it's much more diverse now. But yeah, at the time, it's just like, this is what you should be aiming for. And, for various reasons. One of them, for example, I was a swimmer, so obviously my build was a long way from what I was hoping it would be. So then it's just another, I don't know. Yeah, it's just another thing to think about and feel like you should be doing this. You should be acting this way. You should be looking like this. You should be interested in these things.
Which do you think now, like, do you find that social media still has that negative impact, more so than a positive one, based on where you are now in your journey? Well, not even social media, just media, right?
I mean, I mainly, it's more so the mainstream media are bad now, but I think, my Instagram's mainly swimming, Formula One, my friends, raccoons, and memes. Like, it doesn't really stray too far from that now. So I don't get too much dysphoria from those types of things. But you still feel like it's still there. I think the fact that I was so deeply within that, I think it's still there in my mind, and things can trigger it. But you just try and avoid it as best you can, really. But yeah.
Yeah, it's social media is such it's a fickle beast. It can be like the best and the worst thing for you at any given point in the day. yeah, it's super tough to manage it because you can't control what you're always going to see. Like you can filter to the best of your ability, but ultimately things still slip through the net. So it is like, out of every one of these episodes that we have done so far, social media and school have been the two biggest things that people bring up as like a poignant thing that they can draw to. So it is, it is definitely one that has some serious, downsides to it.
Yeah.
As we're all able to recognize now, I think that it is not all what it's cut out to be, and it does have such a huge amount of power. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that people are aware of this as well, but it is crazy just how much influence these influencers genuinely can have on, how you perceive the world and how you perceive yourself and the things that happen around you. Like, it is genuinely crazy. So I'm glad that you can refine it down to raccoons, because I feel like that's more of a source of joy than it's going to give you a negative side.
Absolutely. The rush I get walking to campus and seeing them rummaging through the trash is unreal.
Oh, what a morning. Right. Cool. So I think what would be really good is, I just recall earlier you mentioned that you had a really good year group, and that probably accounted for such a relative ease with that process while you're at school, having that established respect before you came out and everything. So, I don't think it can really be understated just how demonstrative a role that support network really plays. But like, just from your own personal perspective and, going through that journey, and then specifically with your mental well-being during that time, like, how important to you was having that well-established, friendship group and, close family ties? Like, did you feel like you could turn in many directions at any point, and like what kind of effect that had on the process for you?
Yeah. I think, like I said, I'm extremely lucky to have the friends and family that I do. Mine and Ollie's family are extremely close knit. We live very close together. We see them frequently, and they've always been very supportive in everything that we've both ever done. And yeah, it was definitely there's always some worry, there's always some concern that they'll take it badly. But I wasn't ever particularly worried of a negative reaction from my family. I think it's definitely, they've just that. Yeah, I think our family is our family's amazing, and I've always.
I still think there's like, because I remember when you were like 14, maybe even younger actually, and I remember there was, you speak about everyone being quite supportive, but there was definitely concern. You, like, in retrospective, yeah, you're right, like there wasn't a need to be concerned, but I remember at the time there was definite concern. Like you were kind of telling people, like, bit by bit almost, because you weren't sure how certain people were going to react, and you were very much picking your battles. You knew certain people weren't going to react the other ways that other people did. So do you recall that there was still like some concern, even and I'm saying, like, there was concern, even if you've got a really supportive network and you think they're going to be on your side, despite being super lucky to have that, there is still that underlying concern of, oh shit, how are people going to react?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of comes back to the sort of open discourse thing, where especially with the family, this wasn't ever something that we ever spoke about, because there was no reason to. So you aren't going to know. Like you said, I mean, as I said, they've always been supportive of everything else. and there was no reason to think that they would be mortified. But yeah, there is always that concern, especially when I was sort of coming out to more so. I mean, I came out to you first, and then mum, and I kind of left it. I didn't really explicitly come out to anyone else in the family, purely because I sort of knew, whether she told me or not, I knew that mum had those conversations already. So I was sort of like, I feel like mum's managing it, which again, extremely grateful for, extremely lucky to have that. But definitely with coming out to the people in my in school, like my friends, that was definitely a bit by bit process. Funnily enough, I think the last group of people I told were my closest friends. I think I told everyone else. The second to last group was like the popular kids, because they're always the ones that you're, I don't know, not worried about.
They'll determine whether you get bullied or not.
And I definitely, yeah, it's always the ones you're closest to that you're worried about most, just because naturally, if they have a negative reaction, then that's far more impactful than if someone you sit next to in maths has a negative reaction. Like it,
you care more about what they think.
Sorry,
I said it's the people that you're closest to. You're more invested in what they think, because
absolutely.
you hold them in high regard, you respect them, and you want that to go two ways. So it's like, I completely understand that. That makes total sense.
Like well, I told my partner Maya. I told her pretty early in our relationship, which I think it's always a good idea. But we definitely went through some rocky periods, but she's absolutely 100% supportive, and I couldn't really ask for anything better. And then, like I said, Ollie, always supportive. It was always very good to, I don't know, like I've said multiple times that this is going to get so wet, but I've said multiple times that that Ollie is my best friend, and I've always, we have very similar humor, we have very similar interests. We've always had a very, very strong bond, and yeah, that support from the person who's probably is the most influential person in my life was extremely important to me, and the fact that he more approached me than I had to approach him was actually extremely helpful. I think for other people, if they know that someone is trans or whatever and they're struggling, don't expect them to come to you. Absolutely, there are people that I would go to in my friendship group, Tom or Harry or yourself or Maya or whatever. But when you're struggling with it already, and it's already a massive weight on your shoulders, having to then build yourself up to go and talk to someone about it is, I mean, even talking to counselors, I found that tricky, because you're having to put yourself out there. And I would say that, it's always better from my perspective, and it always has been better. And again, I've been very lucky that people have more come to me to talk about it, because that just takes that initial fear and apprehension away. Again, not like, not in an aggressive way, but actually forcing the conversation on the person that is struggling or is going through this, or isn't quite themselves. That's that for me was always something that I found extremely helpful and extremely it was always good that people would come to me.
Did you find that
yeah.
when they did come to you to talk about it, that sort of initial apprehension or anxiety surrounding the conversation, was that like an immediate lift? If someone else has started the conversation, like, this is what I'm saying. So it's still, even if, you know, you've been approached to talk about it, it's still not 100%. It wasn't at least 100% like that comfort doesn't just immediately come, even though you're not making that first move. It's still like a work in progress to fully divulge all of it, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely takes time to build that up to where you're totally open.
But then even like, you know, I recall some conversations you had with mum, like in, you know, not that many years ago, right? So you've been open for a pretty long time, and even that was like getting blood out of a stone. You know what I mean? And I think you would probably retrospectively look back on yourself and think, oh, I was pretty open then. Like I was, you know, I was willing to share a lot, and I was very close to, you know, me and mum to have those conversations. And yet even then, right, it was still particularly tricky for us to get anything out of you and for you to speak up.
Yeah, and I think that's partly is how the person who initiates it approaches it. If you approach it from you're trying to get something out, and you're sort of
digging.
Yeah, I can't think of a specific example, but you're sort of after something, and you kind of set these boundaries within which the conversation will happen so that you can get to the information that you want to. Immediately, that's sort of, okay, I'll shut that off because I know what you're doing, and I know what my answer is, and I know what you want to hear. But that's already like, I don't know, immediately that's more of a closed conversation.
Yeah, so it's almost like a transactional conversation, right? Where like I'm trying to tease a little bit out, you're starting to like give a little bit because you can see that I'm reacting well to something, and then it's just that, and you just chisel away until you get to eventually a very open and broad conversation where you know, you now feel better about something, and the people who are trying to support you now understand what you're going through in that particular day, right? You know what I mean? And I think like I think we're both thinking of exactly the same day. Like I can remember it really clearly. When like we've had conversations like that. But
yeah, and I think if you open a discussion from, I think that's the thing. If it's someone that you trust and you know that they support you and know that they love you and so on, if they then approach it as if they have an objective, which again is difficult not to do when the person hasn't been open about it in the first place. I get that completely. And this isn't a criticism. But when you're approaching it like that, it is more like trying to get blood out of a stone. But if you approach it from a extremely open, I'm just going to listen, say whatever you want about anything, I am just going to listen, you know, I support you, etc., then you've taken away the apprehension of starting the conversation, and then you've left it completely open. You're not trying to steer it. You're not trying to guide them towards anything. You're purely, I'm taking away that initial nervousness, that initial tension that you're feeling by saying, let's just have a conversation, or let's just, you know, you can just splurge and I will just listen. I'm not going to provide any answers. I'm not going to provide solutions. I am just here to listen and let them go with it. And you might not get a lot out of them to start with. But I think that's a better way of going about it, is not probing, not asking them questions to start the conversation, letting them guide it, and then asking questions upon the information that they've disclosed, if that makes sense. So it just becomes far more open.
It's like it's making the first move and starting the conversation, but not taking any of the agency of where that conversation goes from the person that you're trying to get to open up. It's an analogy I actually used when I had the first episode with you, Ollie. It's like you're in the driver's seat controlling where the car goes. There's just someone sat next to you chipping in every now and then. But ultimately, where that conversation goes is still within your grip. And I think that's like super important for, you know, breaching those kinds of conversations. It's fine to make that first move, but beyond that, it's kind of like, I'm just here for the ride. You tell me where we're going, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that was my analogy, actually, Matty, but I'll let you have it.
Was it? Was it really? You're gonna have to
maybe it's
just gonna get Jack. Can we fact check that one, please?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great analogy, and I think even more so, it's not the person next to you sort of chipping in with directions per se. It's more the person next to you sort of fills up the car, if that makes sense. That they sort of provide the, I don't know, they keep you going.
I get that. That's cool. That's a better take on it.
I like that. That is even better.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that is a much better take. Well, there you go. So Paige has one.
Who came up with it.
Yeah, there you go. You've just done better than both of us, even if it was actually your one.
Yeah, you're welcome, Jack. You're welcome.
Yeah, we'll bank that one. Oh, funny. So I guess just to sort of bring it back in a full cycle, like, I know this is a very pointed question, and I appreciate this is kind of like put you on the spot a bit, but if you can look back holistically at, you know, where you started and where you are now, and you've had all of that life experience between those 2 points, it's a very big question, but is there anything, be it big, small, that sticks out in your mind of, maybe I should have done that differently? Or is there anything that you can think of, like, that you not necessarily regret? Because I don't think, there's things that you can maybe wish you did differently, but I don't think anyone should live with regrets because you just get hung up on them, kind of thing. But is there something that you can think of, like, that you think it could have been more helpful had I done X, Y, and Z, kind of thing?
I can't think of anything small and specific like that necessarily. I mean, like you said, I could have come out sooner. I could have done things earlier, like counseling or whatever. But that's not how it went. So, and ultimately I did it when I was ready at the time. So maybe that was kind of the perfect way to do it. I think for me, the big thing, and this is very specific to me, was my swimming, in that I was sort of a competitive swimmer for a long time, and that it was a blessing and a curse, and that it still is. And I know that I have an unhealthy relationship with swimming, despite the fact I go every day. Is that it's the best distraction. You know, it's exercise and you're on your own, and it's something I enjoy. But it's also, swimming is an extremely gendered sport, obviously, and it, you know,
I mean, it's the center of a big trans debate as well, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. And it kind of pushes me in a way physically, in terms of physical development, that isn't really, especially before I was on hormones and stuff, wasn't where I wanted to be going. And I think I was just about good enough to justify continuing, which again, I'm happy with what I did and I'm proud of what I did, but it definitely put a delay on everything else. And I think
because you couldn't go through couldn't have more medication or surgery and maintain a swimming career. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think, I had opportunities in swimming that I didn't take, because I'm trans. And I don't know. I don't know if I'd do anything differently, but it's definitely, that's something that I'm still very much in the woods with, and I don't know how that's going to pan out. And as I said, I know my relationship with it isn't the healthiest, and it never has been.
It's a really interesting thing you bring up, because like a lot of people in your position now will be will probably listen to something very similar, right? They'll be doing a sport and it's like they can't, as a trans person, maintain a competitive sport that is gendered and be able to either achieve the body achieve the look they want and continue going through the various processes on this like trans journey, right? So it's really interesting. I'm sure a lot of people, if a lot of trans people, if they do listen to this, that that's absolutely something that they'll relate to.
Sports a really tricky one. As you said, it's sort of at the center of every debate at the minute for some reason. It's, again, it kind of comes back to what I said earlier about respect. Is for me personally, I don't really care what category you want to put me in the future, or whatever way around it I have to go. If I can just have that opportunity to compete and do what I love to do, that's enough for me. But there's this absolutely black or white, yes or no discussion around it at the minute, where the solution is either unfairness in theory, or in terms of sporting unfairness, or you just have to exclude trans people altogether. Which, again, I think it just comes back to, we just want to do sport like everyone else. We enjoy it the same as everyone else. We experience it the same as everyone else. And I think, again, talking about, this might be a bit of a tangent, but talking about the swimming, the biggest issue with trans people in sport is that the discussion's never been had. So they were like, trans people can compete if they have this level of testosterone, whatever. And then there's been these theories, and there's been these successful trans people, whether they're unfairly in terms of sporting, in terms of sport, whether they're unfairly successful, is another thing. There's not enough evidence on it either way. And the issue is that trans people were told you can compete. A couple of them were very successful, and all of a sudden they've said, okay, no, you can't compete. But the basis upon which they said you can compete and you can't compete is exactly it's basically the same, in that there isn't enough evidence to justify it either way. And I think that's where the biggest issue for me comes from, is, like you've said, we can compete based on the evidence that you don't think we have an advantage. You don't think we have an advantage because there isn't enough research on it. And then you've banned us from competing because you think we might have an advantage, which, again, I'm sure there's lots of research going on at the minute. But again, it comes back to the discussion was never had. So you've kind of created this mess because you didn't do the work beforehand. But that's a bit of a random tangent. But
no, but I guess it's still relevant in that, like, one of the things that you've maintained throughout this entire conversation is that you think the conversation at a young age, but then conversation in general, is just super important, right? And I think, if those conversations are had more frequently, then half the problems that you're talking about now wouldn't exist, right? And I think that's like a really nice summary of what this is all about.
Absolutely. The conversation should be had about everything and anything. And I don't see why this is any different, or why it should be treated any differently. There's no losers in that situation.
No.
So but yeah, coming back to the question, what I would change, it's tricky. I don't know.
But maybe there
take
isn't.
swimming more seriously, or maybe I would have dropped out. But maybe there isn't. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But then maybe that's also part of the message to get across, right? Is for people who might be going through a trans, there's no easy way through it, right? Like everyone's got to tread their own journey, and you can't regret anything about it. And there's no like special route through it. You know what I mean?
There's no guidebook.
Framework.
No, exactly.
Yeah,
it's such a inherently individual experience. There is no one way to do it that is right or inherently better than somebody else's, because it's yours. You own it from start to finish. And maybe maybe that is the takeaway, that there is nothing that you wish you'd done differently, because ultimately everything that has happened has brought you to where you are now. So thinking about it as maybe I should have done things differently, just not constructive.
No. Because you can talk about what ifs of everything in life, and there's not really any point to it, which again comes back to, like you said, it's such an individual experience. My experience is completely different to another trans swimmer's experience. Like it's so individual. There is no framework, there is no roadmap as to how you're going to tackle it, which comes back to, again, trans influencers all being this sort of homologated blob of what you should be trying to achieve. But it's like, but that's how they've done it. That's not how you should do it. That's the thing. You should look at no trans person should look at another trans person and think that is how I should be doing this, or that is what I should be doing, because that's not true. Whatever you do, or whatever you feel like is right, and when you're ready to do it is when you should do it. And that's sort of, I don't know.
That's a nice takeaway. That's some nice.
It's a really, really nice
advice.
One.
Some nice
when you're ready, it's
passing there. Yeah,
thank you. It's very much whenever you're ready to do what you feel and it needs to be done, that's when it needs to be done. Don't set timelines, which was what I tried to do. And because that just, again, makes it worse and puts pressure on you that's not needed. Everyone's journey is different. Don't feel like because I did, because I was looking at other people and I was different to them, even other trans people, that's not something that you should try and change. That's not something to fake. You shouldn't fake how you are. It's just, again, like I said earlier, that's not just something for trans people to consider. That's something for everyone to consider. Everyone has their own individual experience, and what you're going through, just because it's not the same or similar to what other people are going through, doesn't make it invalid. So I think it's ultimately it's kind of comforting. I think it's more comforting than daunting to know that you are on your own on that journey, because it means that everything you choose to do regarding it, or anything that you do regarding it, isn't wrong.
I like that.
So it is no one knows what you're going through apart from you, and when you're ready and when you feel like you should be doing something, or you need to do something, then that's when you need to do it, be it 13 years old or 30 years old or whatever. It will happen when it happens, sort of thing. So,
nice one.
Really, really like that. It's a very, very nice takeaway, that one. Well, we are coming up to the second allotted time limit from our friends at Zoom. So I think we have had a really, really good conversation here. Thank you so much, Paige, for being a part of this. Right. It's really, really cool to have you on. super, super insightful, really interesting to listen to you, talk about your experiences. And Ollie, obviously, thank you for joining this one too. It's been great to have you
You're
both
welcome.
on, even if you are stealing my analogies, but we can check that one in the post. But no, thanks for listening, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll catch you in the next one.